My husband suddenly passed away. 5 weeks later, my parents arranged me to marry the man who'd always been jealous of my husband. My parents married me off to Rajit when I was 22. He was 43 and a family friend, and had been looking at me as his bride-to-be for almost a decade. His family also had generational wealth, which my parents said took priority over everything. Thing is, this wasn't even the real kicker. The real kicker was that my first husband, Omar, the man I married for love, had been gone for just 5 weeks. My parents barely even reacted when I told them, just started making phone calls. And before I knew it, I was standing in a sari, still numb, being forced to feel Rajit's hand trace my face as he talked about how long he's been waiting for this. At some point during the ceremony, Rajit leaned in and whispered that I was his from the moment he saw me. Now it's just official. At the same time, my parents approached me. They told me they know it's hard, but I needed to let go of Omar, that Rajit owned me now. I went to protest, but my parents interrupted. They were planning a world cruise next summer and asked me to please be a good wife so Rajit's family could reward them for my generosity. They then bowed to Rajit and on my behalf promised I wouldn't be any trouble. I just stayed silent, too numb to speak. The very next day, I moved into Rajit's borderline mansion. The moment he saw the photos of Omar and me that I had kept, he insisted I destroy them. I told him please. I'd keep them under the bed. He wouldn't see them, but he walked real close to me, grabbed my jaw too hard to not be a threat, and told me that was an order. That night, I helped him burn all my printed photos of me and Omar. The night after that, I smiled and gave him my phone so he could delete every photo. The week after, I was wearing the diamond necklace he bought instead of Omar's hand-cut wooden one with my name etched into it. What hurt just as much was how my parents acted. Every few weeks, I'd get a text off them. Another payment came in. We're so proud to have a daughter who is such a dedicated wife. I'd stare at the screen and reply with a broken smiley face. My parents would actually come to visit sometimes, but they never paid real attention. They never noticed the new bruises or the new black eye. Instead, they were too busy talking to Rajit about the holidays they're taking. Meanwhile, I still kept my husband's number in my old flip phone, secretly texting him goodnight with a love heart emoji, then replying to myself with the nickname he used to call me. It was like that for 18 months. I was the picture-perfect submissive wife, the one who gave in to every demand and accepted every piece of jewelry as Rajit's apology for every beating. But then it happened. I remember watching a YouTube video about an engineer, and something sparked inside me. My dream had always been to be an engineer, and Omar was saving to send me to college. That night, after Rajit finished taking advantage of me, because that's what it was, I brought up the idea to him. I said it would be from home, part-time, he wouldn't even notice it. When I said that, I remember he turned to me with this demonic look on his face, the kind only truly evil people make, then told me with the coldest voice, "What did you just say?" That's when, for the first time, I found the courage to answer. I told him I wanted to go to university and slap. I was interrupted by his hand meeting my face. "Talk back to me again, and I will make that feel like a massage." He then stared me down until I nodded and apologized. I cried myself to sleep that night. I woke up the next morning to the sound of someone downstairs. I went to check it out and saw Rajit, my parents, and Omar's little brother Mohammed. My heart dropped. Mohammed was the one thing in my life that kept me sane. Omar never had parents and was like a father to him. Mohammed currently lived with foster parents, but once a week Rajit permitted me to see him. Well, he put a stop to that morning. He said what I did was unacceptable and spoke as if I had betrayed him. I remember staring at my parents in disbelief, pointing to my new black eye, begging them to really look for even half a second. Yet they just nodded in approval at Rajit's words. Seeing Mohammed reach for my hand while getting dragged out crying was the most I'd felt since Omar. But feeling Rajit grab my waist and slowly pull me back while I reached back for Mohammed ignited a feeling I'd never felt. I remember making my mind up at that very moment. I was done. That night, I quietly packed my things. I grabbed only what I needed, including the one photo of me and Omar I had successfully hid in an old tampon box, and crept out without explanation. I made the 40-plus hour journey across the country through buses and trains. I arrived at Omar's best friend's house exhausted, having not eaten, slept, or drank water. And when his wife saw me, she lunged to hug me. She held me forever before asking if I was here for the truth. That's when I stumbled. What truth? I was here because I was escaping. She just looked at me like she knew something I didn't. She then invited me to go sit in the kitchen while she called out to her husband that I was finally here. They both came down, but didn't even say anything to me. Just handed me Omar's notebook, something I never even knew existed. Omar's best friend revealed while crying that Omar had noticed something and wrote about it in this notebook. Apparently, he'd always said it was too dangerous to keep in our house in case it happened. The way they said that made me nervous. I asked in case what happened, and they told me to take a look for myself. They opened the notebook, and my heart shattered the minute I started reading. Omar had written about Rajit, how he watches me at family gatherings, how he talks to my parents and looks at me while doing it. That's when it dawned on me. Omar had known something. I flipped through the pages with trembling fingers, each entry making my stomach turn. Omar had documented everything. Dates, times, conversations he'd overheard. The first entry made my hands shake even harder. Rajit had cornered me at the temple feast 3 years ago, touched my shoulder while my parents watched and smiled. I remembered that day. I'd thought nothing of it then, just an uncle being friendly. But Omar had seen what I hadn't. My phone buzzed, Rajit asking if I was enjoying my vacation. My blood ran cold. He knew I'd left. I looked up at Hamza and Fatima, my voice barely working. The words came out before I could stop them. The truth I'd been too afraid to consider finally taking shape. Hamza pulled out his phone, showing me a photo that made everything click into place. Rajit's car, parked outside our apartment building the night Omar died. The timestamp glowed at me, 2:47 a.m. Fatima sat down beside me, her hand on my shoulder. She explained how Omar had changed in those final weeks. New locks on the doors, different routes to work, always checking over his shoulder. But Rajit's cousin worked security at our building. He'd reported nothing unusual that night. The cover-up had started immediately. My phone lit up again. Mohammed texting from his foster home. My heart stopped as I read his message. Rajit had shown up there, asking about me. Mrs. Chen was scared. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. I could run further, disappear completely, or I could go back and protect the only family I had left. Mrs. Chen's voicemail played through the speaker, her voice shaking as she described Rajit's visit. The decision made itself. I opened my laptop and booked a return ticket while Hamza protested. He kept saying I was walking into danger, but Mohammed needed me. I couldn't abandon him like everyone had abandoned me. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone with Omar's notebook. That's when I found it, a hidden pocket sewn into the back cover. Inside were photos that made my knees weak. Rajit's car following us. Multiple dates, all from the weeks before Omar's death. I photographed every single page, every photo, uploading them to cloud storage. Hamza knocked on the door, mentioning his neighbor had just called. Rajit's brother had been spotted at the corner store an hour ago. They were already tracking me. Another text came through, this time from my mother. She'd forwarded a message from Rajit claiming I was mentally unstable and making wild accusations. Her added question stung more than any slap. "What have you done now?" My phone rang. Priya, my college roommate. Her voice was strained as she told me my parents had just shown up at her workplace, asking if I'd contacted her. They'd seemed desperate, she said. I went back to the notebook, examining every page more carefully. That's when I found it, hidden in the binding itself. Omar's life insurance documents. Across the top, in his handwriting, refused to change beneficiary. The date was 1 week before his death. The last page of the notebook made my blood freeze. A name circled 3 times. Mira Rajit, drowned 2009. A question mark beside it. On the train back, I tried to stay calm, but my brother's text shattered any composure I had left. Rajit was offering to pay for his cancer treatment if I came home quietly. The manipulation was so calculated it made me sick. I scrolled through my old messages with Omar, finding one that broke me completely. Sent the night before he died. If anything happens, check my notebook. Love you forever. He'd known. He'd tried to protect me even then. My work email pinged. Rajit had contacted my boss, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and needed extended leave. When I tried to log into my remote desktop, access denied. He was systematically cutting off every escape route. The bank called next. Suspicious activity on my accounts. Rajit had filed fraud reports on all my credit cards as my concerned husband. I was watching my life get dismantled piece by piece. At the police station, I tried to file a report. The officer's face changed when I mentioned Rajit's name. He knew him personally, explained how Rajit's family donated to their youth programs. These accusations would need proof, he said. Behind him on the wall, I could see Rajit's photo on the donor board. The next morning, I went to Omar's grave before dawn. Fresh flowers sat on the headstone with a card. Sorry for your loss, Rajit. The groundskeeper found me there, mentioned how Rajit visited weekly, always asked if anyone else came by. He'd been monitoring even this sacred space. My aunt called while I sat in the cemetery. The whole family was talking, she said. Rajit had shown them texts where I'd threatened him. I stared at my phone, recognizing messages I'd never sent. Then it hit me. He still had my old phone, the one he'd controlled. He'd been sending messages as me after I left. Dr. Patel reached out through email. Rajit had requested my therapy session notes. She'd refused, but wanted me to be careful. Even my mental health history was being weaponized. I met with Mohammed's teacher, Ms. Garcia, at a coffee shop near the school. She looked uncomfortable as she explained that Rajit had tried to add himself as Mohammed's emergency contact. He'd cited our reconciliation as the reason. Ms. Garcia had blocked the attempt after Mohammed broke down crying in class at the mention of Rajit's name. The imam from Omar's mosque pulled me aside after evening prayers. His face was troubled as he told me Rajit had approached him, asking him to confirm that I'd been unstable since Omar's death. The web of lies was spreading through every community I'd ever been part of. Rajit's childhood photos arrived on my phone that evening. Pictures of me at family gatherings from years ago, ones I'd never seen before. In each photo, I noticed his presence in the background, always watching. The timestamps showed he'd been documenting me since I was 16. My hands trembled as I recognized the manipulation. He wanted me to feel nostalgic while simultaneously realizing how long he'd been stalking me. I spent the night organizing every piece of evidence, creating multiple backups across cloud services Rajit didn't know existed. My fingers moved mechanically, screenshotting every text, every email, every social media post where he portrayed himself as the concerned husband while I stayed silent. Mrs. Chen called early the next morning. A man claiming to be a social worker had returned, asking detailed questions about my visits with Mohammed. She'd grown suspicious when she noticed his luxury car. No social worker could afford that vehicle. She'd refused to provide any information and was considering filing a police report. The domestic violence hotline counselor listened patiently as I explained my situation. Without physical evidence or police reports from during the marriage, my options remained limited. The counselor provided resources but warned that Rajit's wealth and connections would make any legal battle challenging. Omar's coworker Malik reached out unexpectedly. He offered me his spare room, explaining that Omar had been like a brother to him. Rajit wouldn't think to look there. When I arrived at his apartment, Malik showed me to Omar's old desk, which he'd kept untouched since his death. Inside the desk drawer, I discovered bank statements I'd never seen. Large cash withdrawals marked security consultation in Omar's handwriting. The dates aligned with the weeks before his death. My heart raced as I realized Omar had been trying to protect us. I searched online for information about Mira Rajit's drowning. An old newspaper article appeared, featuring a quote from the victim's sister questioning the circumstances. The sister had mentioned Mira's unusual lethargy in the days before her death, symptoms that matched what I'd read about certain untraceable substances. Rajit's social media posts painted a different story. He shared prayers for his mentally ill wife, garnering sympathy from hundreds of followers. Comments poured in supporting him, calling me ungrateful, disturbed, selfish. I watched my reputation crumble while staying silent, knowing any response would be twisted against me. My visa status notification arrived like a punch to the gut, 2 weeks until expiration. Rajit had sponsored it and could revoke his support at any time. The immigration lawyer I consulted confirmed my worst fears. Without his cooperation, I'd face deportation. Fatima's cousin, who worked at the hospital, agreed to meet me privately. She admitted in hushed tones that Omar's toxicology report had been rushed through. The pathologist who signed off was Rajit's golf buddy. The medical cover-up ran deeper than I'd imagined. At the grocery store, Rajit's mother appeared beside me in the produce section. She spoke loudly about my delusions and mental instability, ensuring other shoppers could hear. The security cameras captured our interaction, but her words were carefully chosen to avoid anything actionable. Through his lawyers, Rajit presented an ultimatum: return as his wife or face abandonment, divorce proceedings, and deportation. The legal document outlined how he'd graciously forgive my temporary confusion if I came home within 72 hours. My parents' text arrived that evening. The cruise was booked. They begged me not to ruin this for them. Their message made clear where their priorities lay: their comfort over their daughter's safety. Hidden in Omar's childhood Quran at the mosque, where men's belongings were kept respectfully untouched, I found another envelope. Inside was the private investigator's full report. Photos showed Rajit meeting with someone listed as a pharmaceutical consultant. The implications made my blood run cold. I called the investigator's number from the report. Now retired, he remembered Omar clearly. He'd advised Omar to go to the police, but Omar had explained that Rajit owned half of them. The investigator's voice carried regret as he described Omar's desperation in those final weeks. Malik received a job offer the next day, double his current salary from one of Rajit's subsidiary companies. He declined immediately, telling them Omar's memory was worth more than money. His current employer terminated him the following week, citing restructuring. We spent long nights piecing together the timeline. Malik's analytical mind helped identify patterns I'd missed. Our shared grief over Omar created a bond built on truth-seeking rather than romance. Every discovery strengthened our resolve. Despite my rage, I followed Hamza's advice to let Rajit think he was winning. During Mohammed's supervised park visit, I loudly mentioned my new apartment number in case of emergencies. While noticing Rajit's car parked across the street, Mohammed's quick nod showed he'd memorized it. The investigator's report revealed another horrifying detail. Rajit's first wife had experienced identical symptoms to Omar before her death. Unusual fatigue, confusion, difficulty breathing. The pattern was undeniable. My uncle visited Malik's apartment unexpectedly. He admitted what I'd suspected. The entire family knew something was wrong with Rajit, but Rajit's family had threatened their import business. Fear had kept them complicit and silent. 3 more relatives reached out privately over the following days. Each confessed they'd noticed Rajit's obsession with me, his controlling behavior, his violent temper. They'd all chosen silence over intervention, prioritizing their business relationships over my safety. Dr. Patel connected me with Catherine, a lawyer who worked pro bono for abuse victims. Catherine reviewed my evidence and delivered harsh truth. Criminal prosecution would be nearly impossible, but civil action might succeed. We began building a case focused on financial abuse and immigration fraud. I confronted my parents at their home while Rajit was traveling. The words poured out accusingly. They'd sold me to my husband's killer. My mother broke down, admitting they'd suspected something was wrong but needed the money for my father's medical bills. They'd chosen financial security over their daughter's life. Rajit's brother followed me after that visit. I noticed his car at 3 different locations before losing him in the metro system. The surveillance was intensifying as Rajit grew more desperate. The newspaper article about Mira's death contained another crucial detail. Neighbors had reported unusual lethargy in the days before her drowning. The same symptoms appeared in the investigators' notes about Rajit's first wife. The pattern was consistent and terrifying. Mrs. Chen took decisive action to protect Mohammed. She filed official foster care papers that prevented non-family contact. Rajit couldn't claim family status without acknowledging our separation. It was a small victory in an ocean of defeats. Hamza's mosque brothers began appearing wherever I went. Without being asked, they'd formed a subtle protection rotation. Their presence provided comfort even as Rajit's attempts to isolate me intensified. Rajit's lawyer filed paperwork to have me declared mentally incompetent. Dr. Patel's assessment derailed that attempt, her professional evaluation confirming my mental stability. Another small victory, another blocked escape route for Rajit. My mother witnessed Rajit's mask finally slip. She'd gone to his office to discuss my situation when she heard him screaming at his lawyer. His words echoed through the closed door. I was his. He'd waited. I belonged to him. She left shaking, finally understanding the monster they delivered me to. Former co-workers began reaching out. Rajit's smear campaign had seemed excessive for a concerned husband. His desperate attempts to control the narrative were backfiring as people noticed the inconsistencies in his story. Catherine discovered a pattern of financial abuse in our bank records. Withdrawals during times I remembered being incapacitated. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The paper trail revealed systematic theft disguised as marital finances. My visa expired in 24 hours. The immigration lawyer prepared an emergency asylum application based on domestic violence. Rajit had already alerted immigration authorities, claiming I was a flight risk. Time was running out. Rajit's sister approached Fatima at the temple. In a moment of honesty, she admitted what everyone knew. Rajit was dangerous, but their family's fear of him ran deeper than their concern for his victims. She walked away before saying more. The stakes crystallized with brutal clarity. Either I proved Omar's murder or faced deportation to a country where Rajit's reach extended even further. There would be no escape if he got me back there. I handled the mounting pressure by documenting everything with methodical calm. The terrified wife who'd fled in the night had transformed into someone harder, more focused. My allies noticed the change, drawing strength from my determination. My father finally broke his silence during a brief phone call. He believed me but felt powerless against Rajit's family influence. His admission came too late to matter, but I recorded it anyway. Every piece of evidence mattered now. 7 people agreed to sign affidavits about suspicious patterns surrounding Omar's death and Rajit's behavior. Catherine compiled their statements into a compelling narrative of systematic abuse and potential murder. Immigration granted an emergency stay based on the domestic violence evidence. The relief was temporary, but crucial. It gave us more time to build the case against Rajit. Rajit's response was swift and vicious. He filed a defamation lawsuit claiming damages to his reputation and business. The legal filing portrayed me as a gold digger who'd invented abuse allegations for financial gain. His lawsuit stalled when his lawyers couldn't provide evidence of actual damages beyond reputation harm. His businesses remained profitable, his social standing intact within his immediate circle. The judge requested specific financial impact documentation. Rajit's business partners began distancing themselves as rumors spread through the community. Money talked, but gossip traveled faster. Whispers about his first wife's death and Omar's suspicious passing created uncomfortable questions. Omar's family in Pakistan reached out through video call. They'd always wondered about the rushed funeral, the quick cremation. Their support arrived years too late, but added weight to the growing chorus of doubts about Rajit's version of events. 15 women from the temple signed a petition supporting my character. They'd watched me grow up, witnessed my marriage to Omar, observed my transformation under Rajit's control. Their collective voice challenged Rajit's narrative. I presented the full timeline to a detective who wasn't on Rajit's donor list. Young and ambitious, she agreed to review Omar's case file for irregularities. Her fresh eyes might see what others had chosen to ignore. The detective's preliminary review found numerous inconsistencies in the original investigation. Witness statements that didn't align, evidence collection gaps, rushed conclusions. She couldn't promise anything but agreed to dig deeper. Rajit's first wife's best friend finally broke her silence. She revealed that Mira had called the night before her death, terrified and begging for help. The friend had dismissed it as marital troubles. The guilt had haunted her ever since. A medical examiner from a neighboring district admitted experiencing unusual pressure to close Omar's case quickly. He documented his concerns in personal notes, creating a paper trail of interference. Catherine added his statement to our growing file. The handwriting expert authenticated Omar's investigation documents, confirming the timeline we'd constructed. Each piece of evidence strengthened our case while Rajit's story showed more cracks. Community leaders met privately to discuss the Rajit situation. They wanted to avoid scandal while addressing the serious allegations. Their concern focused more on reputation than justice, but their involvement signaled shifting dynamics. Rajit's desperation manifested in a false police report. He claimed I'd threatened him, providing doctored text messages as evidence. The police detained me for questioning based on his complaint. Sitting in the holding cell, I watched the clock tick past midnight. The concrete bench pressed cold against my legs as I shifted position for the 100th time. My mind raced through scenarios while my body remained trapped. The detective who'd brought me in had seemed skeptical of Rajit's claims, but protocol demanded they investigate every threat report. Malik struggled to gather bail money in the middle of the night. Banks were closed. ATM withdrawal limits meant multiple trips to different machines. I could picture him driving frantically across town, calling everyone who might help. The support system I'd built was scrambling while I sat powerless behind bars. Alone with my thoughts, I pulled out the small notepad they'd allowed me to keep. My hands moved across the paper, writing a letter to Mohammed in case something happened. Not dramatic final words, just practical instructions about where I'd hidden evidence copies, which lawyers to trust, who would help him. The pen scratched against cheap paper as I documented everything that mattered. By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones. The female officer who checked on me mentioned that my lawyer had arrived. Catherine's presence meant she'd received my emergency message. I straightened my wrinkled clothes and finger-combed my hair, preparing to face whatever came next. The interrogation room felt smaller than expected. Catherine sat beside me as the detective reviewed Rajit's evidence. The doctored text messages were laughably amateur when examined closely. Timestamps that didn't align, language patterns that didn't match my writing style. Catherine presented our evidence file in response, watching the detective's expression shift from routine investigation to genuine interest. The prosecutor reviewed everything Catherine had compiled, page after page of documentation, witness statements, financial records. His fingers paused on the medical examiner's notes about pressure to close Omar's case. He looked up, made a phone call, then another. Within an hour, I was walking out of the police station into harsh morning sunlight. Catherine drove me to her office where we reviewed our options. The criminal case remained weak without a body to exhume or direct evidence of poisoning, but the community mediation scheduled at the temple offered another path. Traditional justice systems existed alongside legal ones in our community. Catherine had already contacted the imam about facilitating. 3 days later, the temple's main hall filled with community members. The mediation required both parties to appear before respected elders. I arrived early, choosing a seat where I could see everyone who entered. Malik sat behind me, his presence steady and reassuring. Hamza and Fatima flanked my other side. Rajit entered with his entire family, parents, siblings, cousins. They formed a protective wall around him, but I noticed the tension in their faces. His sister kept glancing at her young daughter, something shifting in her expression each time. The imam called the session to order. I stood first, Omar's notebook in my hands. Page by page, I showed the evidence to the assembled community. The photos of Rajit's car following us, the timeline of Omar's increasing paranoia, the life insurance documents with his refusal to change beneficiaries. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people recognized the pattern. Rajit's lawyer tried to claim forgery, but the handwriting expert's authentication certificate countered that immediately. When Rajit himself stood to respond, his usual smooth confidence had cracked. He gestured wildly, pointed at me, paced back and forth, but no coherent defense emerged from his movements. The imam asked direct questions of various witnesses. Mohammed's teacher, Ms. Garcia, described Rajit's attempts to gain access to the boy. The detective presented her preliminary findings about irregularities in Omar's case. Each testimony added another crack to Rajit's carefully constructed image. Then the imam turned to Rajit's sister. She sat frozen for a long moment, her daughter's hand in hers. The entire room waited. When she finally stood, her voice started as barely a whisper. She glanced at her daughter once more before speaking louder. 2 words that changed everything. Too much. She knew too much about what her brother was capable of. The imam's next question rang through the silent hall. He asked Rajit directly about Omar's death. The sacred space demanded truth. Lying in the temple brought spiritual consequences their family couldn't ignore. Rajit's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. His silence stretched on, damning in its completeness. Community members shifted in their seats. Some who'd supported Rajit began moving away from his family's section. The weight of collective judgment pressed down on the room. I watched Rajit's parents exchange glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. The imam presented the options. Push for criminal prosecution with limited evidence and likely failure, or accept traditional community justice. Blood money for Omar's family and complete social exile for Rajit. The choice was mine to make before the assembly. I stood again, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. My hands steadied as I considered both paths. Criminal prosecution might fail, leaving Rajit free to continue his patterns, but community justice, while not providing jail time, would destroy what he valued most: his standing, his business connections, his carefully maintained image. My decision came out clear and firm: community justice. The imam nodded, turning to Rajit's family with the terms: payment to Omar's family in Pakistan, complete exile from all community spaces. Word would spread to every temple, every business, every social gathering. Rajit would become a ghost in his own world. Rajit's parents huddled with their lawyer. The amount requested was substantial, but not ruinous. The community leaders had calculated carefully. After 20 minutes of heated discussion among his family, they agreed. Preserving their remaining reputation mattered more than protecting their son. But Rajit himself wasn't finished. He stood abruptly, pointing at me, making demands about dowry money, the traditional gift my parents should have provided but never did. His final attempt at manipulation fell flat as community members actually laughed. The audacity of a murderer demanding dowry from his victim's widow broke through their usual politeness. The imam formally pronounced the judgment. Rajit was banned from all community spaces effective immediately. His family would pay the blood money within 30 days. Any violation would result in criminal charges being pursued with full community support. The temple's social media pages would share his photo with warnings to other communities. I left the temple feeling hollow rather than victorious. Justice had been served, but Omar remained gone. Mohammed still needed stability. My life required rebuilding from scorched earth. Survival didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like ash and determination mixed together. Within a week, Rajit's presence vanished from local spaces. Restaurants refused his reservations. The country club revoked his membership. Business associates stopped returning calls. His family scrambled to salvage their remaining connections by distancing themselves from him completely. The solution came swiftly. Rajit would manage their Dubai operations, far enough away to minimize damage to the family reputation, but still useful to their business empire. He boarded a plane 2 weeks after the temple judgment, his local life effectively erased. Mrs. Chen contacted me about Mohammed's future. The foster care paperwork could be modified for adoption. She'd grown fond of him but recognized our bond. The legal process moved quickly with Catherine's help. Within months, I was signing papers that made me Mohammed's legal guardian, fulfilling what Omar had always wanted. My parents attempted reconciliation through carefully orchestrated visits. They brought gifts, made apologies, cried genuine tears. I accepted their words but maintained careful boundaries. Forgiveness didn't require forgetting. They could visit Mohammed supervised, rebuild slowly if at all. Trust required more than tears. At Omar's grave, Mohammed and I found a different scene. The groundskeeper had removed all of Rajit's flowers over the months. When I asked why, he simply shrugged and mentioned it seemed wrong, that man coming here. The community's judgment extended even to cemetery maintenance. Catherine called 6 months later with news. Rajit had violated the agreement, trying to contact me through a business intermediary. The community leaders responded swiftly. Criminal charges were now being pursued with full backing. His Dubai exile would become permanent one way or another. The engineering degree ceremony fell exactly 1 year after the temple judgment. Mohammed cheered from the audience as I walked across the stage, the tassel on my cap swinging with each step. 3 women sat with him. Others I'd helped navigate similar situations with their own controlling husbands. My testimony had created a pathway others could follow. The small apartment I shared with Mohammed had photos on every wall, not hidden in tampon boxes or burned in midnight fires, but displayed proudly. Omar smiled from frames next to Mohammed's school pictures, my graduation photos, moments of the life we'd built from ruins. The scars remained. Some nights I still checked locks twice, still flinched at unexpected knocks, but ownership of my life had been reclaimed completely, not through the family who'd sold me or the man who'd tried to possess me, but through chosen family who'd helped me survive and a future I was building one day at a time.